All right, folks. Cleaned up the camera a little bit. Looks a lot better, I would say. I got the balance correct, and the frame rate looks better, and it's not quite as smushy as it was yesterday. Um, so today we're gonna mostly go at rule number one here, which is make a commitment. Um, I'm gonna fire up a game where I made a certain commitment and got good at it, and then called it at a certain point. So it will focus. It'll help us focus a little bit on the make a commitment mantra. While it'll give you something to watch while I ramble instead of just look at my smushy little head in the corner here. But uh, Vermintide 2 was a game that Andy and I played for a month, maybe a little longer. It is a game with many difficulty levels that stack up, and uh, had a DLC that added an additional difficulty that I think kind of pushed the game out of the realm of like normal players, and I think this is a common thing in video games that happens. I'm gonna edit my filter real quick here. I'm a little too translucent, I think. There we go. All right, so the game had difficulties at launch, difficulty selections, not difficulties in the launch, and eventually they added DLC that added like an extra super duper difficulty, and I think at that point they kind of blew it. They blew the amount of commitment that people would want to make to the game. So let's start off with some of my notes here. Making a commitment, like many things, it's complicated. You need to take each game and each case on its own merits. It's tough it's easier in video games. There are perhaps strictly better or worse or correct choices that can be made. There's unlikely to be a +1 weapon and then a +2 weapon. You're going to probably just take the +2 weapon. Like, these are simple things. Like, when there's a pit, Mario should probably not fall in it. There are better choices, there are worse choices, there are correct choices when it's more or less binary. In the real world or the practical world, because sometimes video game world is overlapping with real life, your choices are not always better, worse, correct. They can just be worse and worser, or incorrect, and you don't really have an option. You need to weigh the merits. Like your rule of like, I'll always take the +2 sword, maybe doesn't apply when there's like a curse sword and a curse sword. You're like, which curse am I stuck with? So think about the other thing is the commitment is it's not necessarily a commitment to being better at the game, in the sense of, what are you sitting down to do? Are you sitting down to have fun? Is losing at the game fun? Usually not. Sometimes it teaches you a lot when you lose, but it isn't necessarily fun. Is getting better at the game fun? Will the amount of energy you have to expend to get better be worth it? Is getting better at the game a mugs game? Is it a game for? Is it the game getting better? The game of getting better, a thing that appeals to you because you see someone streaming it who's really good at it, and you're like, that looks fun, and you realize, like, you get kind of fooled. We talked about this when I talked about all of the rules in aggregate in the first video, but sometimes when you're looking at the window into the world that is YouTube, you get fooled into thinking like, oh, I could do that. Sometimes you see something that looks really easy. Like, I've seen people playing Vermintide on the highest difficulty, the DLC difficulty, by themselves with, one character. They've killed off everybody else intentionally because they're so good at the game. They just want to be by themselves in a game that's designed to have 4 players and has fail states that are like, you didn't even get killed, but you got like immobilized and you need another player to like save you. And they're able to play the game at a level that avoids all those scenarios and still beats the level and just goes on and on. Like, they're probably one of the best players in the world at that game, and that means a lot more now than it ever did. Like when I was growing up, there weren't 8 billion people in the world. So being a top 50 in a game right now is such a vanishingly small percentage. So you should probably sit down at the game to have fun. It doesn't mean that you play like crap or you never get better. My personality is to try and be good at whatever I'm doing. And so I will sit down. The commitment is to having fun, but to having fun doesn't mean that you don't necessarily learn to play better. And learning to play better doesn't necessarily mean that you have no fun. So maybe a little balance is what you should look into. Approaching anything in order to be like good at it will probably result in a certain amount of fun, but it's gonna have. You're gonna have to make a commitment to looking up strategies in your downtime when you're not playing the game. There's a lot of value to taking time off of a game, just taking a nap, playing it the next day, going to bed. All things that naturally occur anyway. Like sometimes just pushing to practice in the moment isn't gonna result in a betterness that you'll see right now. But it may be that taking a break will make you better the next day. Sometimes getting better means moving up to another difficulty, and the difficulty changes, from game to game. Each case on its own merits means maybe something you like about the game gets removed. Sometimes an entire category of weapons become unavailable because, like, on lower level difficulties, having a minigun with a big spin up and then you would mow down dudes, like the way the game was tuned. The spin up, yeah, it was annoying, and then mowing down people was great. And then maybe on the high difficulties, like spin up time maybe is so long that you get killed and the mowing down doesn't happen. You're mowing down groups of enemies that now have too many hit points to get mowed down. So you really got to think about it. I think when it came to Vermintide, the highest, I forget if it was champion or legendary. It's probably legendary. Of those two words, legendary sounds like, the legendary champion is like, there's champions and there's the legendary champion. The champion of legends, I suppose, would work too, but in the exact parlance, I think legendary was the higher difficulty. If the game doesn't reward you for playing at that difficulty, and sometimes the rewards are literal, right? Like sometimes it's like more better gear, not just more gear. I do tend to prefer, I think, in the long term, thinking about how games work and stuff, when a game rewards you more or quicker over better gear, I think works out better for a larger group of players. So you sit down to make, gosh, I just get mooched in that game. I just caught it out of the corner of my eye while I'm reading my script here. But in Vermintide, getting better wasn't necessarily more fun, and it wasn't more rewarding. So it was like, why were you doing it? It was slightly more rewarding. I think you had better odds of getting the best gear, but it wasn't like a guarantee or anything. And then of course getting that better gear just meant either when you went down a difficulty, now you're like the game was very like playable, or that the highest difficulty became more playable. But like I said, there's people out there who are like soloing it. That's never going to be me in the amount of time that I interact with the game. In Vermintide, a lot of the fun was in the setting, the moment-to-moment combat, and then for me, playing with my friend. So honestly, the difficulty didn't add much more to the game other than teach me that I could exploit all of the mechanics, like made me like research like better skill picks and things like that. So it would force your hand of like, you know, the getting caught by an immobilization enemy wasn't that big a deal on like easy or even normal, but as you got harder and harder, it's like you were really asking a lot of the people you're playing with to stop what they're doing and save you. So learning to like avoid that stuff became a higher priority. Learning to block. There was a block mechanic that was always there, but on like higher difficulties, like, oh, I should block and I should push and I should do all these things in the game. So the commitment to what was I making a commitment to there? It was like I was committed to making my character better so that I could more easily help the team out when the team struggled, and I wouldn't have to put the pressure on the team to help me. It's just really not that common that I'm enticed by higher level rewards in games. I'm sort of repeating myself there. But so getting better at the game was worth it until the game was asking too much of everybody involved. And I think, you know, to sort of deviate from the thing here and talk about Vermintide here, which I didn't put too much Vermintide up on the site when I was playing, but I think the developers of Vermintide felt pressured because their insight into the world were probably like their forums, maybe the Reddit and popular streamers of their game, and those popular streamers played it so much that the default champion, if champion was the second hardest difficulty, the second highest champion, became very doable, especially if multiple streamer level players. To call streamer could be any level of player, but there tends to be a desire to watch, like it's easier for someone to be like really good at the game and then add some personality than it is to be like a personality and learn to be good at the game. So when you go to Twitch, you tend to flop into like, oh, look at these high tier like players, and they have an easy thing to hang their hat on of like, come see the great player. We're so digressing here, but you know, people who like solo dungeons in Destiny or solo levels in Vermintide or set world records in Double Dragon. I could put that run up, but it's not. It's maybe that would be shorter and would like force me to be more concise here. But so what are you making a commitment to? I personally, I think you should have the balance on the commitment be towards having fun and getting good at the game so that you have fun, not only having fun or only getting good at the game. Like practice it until you're really good at the game. Research the game so that you know what you're practicing. Make sure your commitment is towards the right things. You know, it can be. I think in this game, every class ended up being very playable on the earliest, like the non-DLC version of the game had, like everybody was like well balanced, and then it became a little more questionable what was valid or was like easy enough to play at higher levels in order to get through the higher difficulties. That might be just about it. So when I say make a commitment, I mean, you know, realize that you're going to have to play the game. And it's funny because commitments sound like they're these long-term things. And in the sense of it's the longest term commitment, making a commitment to the game is the longest term thing during the duration of you playing the game. But at some point, you're going to move on. Like, this game was really great. And I remember saying to Andrew, I really like this game. I'm not going to play it anymore unless you're around. Which was meant to say, like, you know, like that I would happily play it with him at any time, but that practicing it, and I could tell I wasn't gonna get good enough to like solo carry the whole team on those highest difficulties. if everybody was dead, like, could I do it? No, it wasn't Destiny. I was getting to points like that to some degree in Destiny. And there's whole communities around like doing hard carries, as they call them in Destiny. So I said to him like, hey, like we can keep playing this, but um, a lot of the investment from me is going to be like just for you and me having fun, not me getting any better at this game. Well, doing the things I think of like logging in every day and keeping your hand in, your practice up, and continuing to research for a lot of like edge case strats that make certain difficult parts of the game like easier or doable. So, um, and then I think we just kind of ended up like floating away from the game. The game became too hard. It was too hard for us as just a 2-man team. It is a 4-man game. Um, I was discussing the if you're just here for like the rules, the explanations. I think we're done here. But I'm gonna throw in a little anecdote I have from talking to CD the other day. But yeah, make a commitment, and commitment means a lot of things, and it doesn't mean playing it until the end of time. Commitment. But for the anecdote, CD and I were talking about like where the difficulty of Destiny lied, and what it was asking of players and stuff. And I think Destiny struggled a little bit with the like streamer phenomenon of like, how do we make the game challenging enough for the guy who can like do a dungeon run without dying and the common player, and what was the value on a common player. We would talk about, like, I always thought of myself as like a B plus, like a really good above average Destiny player, and Dag was right there with me. Wasn't quite up there. He would always say like, "A guy like you," he'd always say that kind of stuff to me, and I was like, "Well, you're right there," but I don't know why he didn't have it. It wasn't an intellect thing. It wasn't a dedication thing. It could have been somewhat of an age thing. I see quite a loss of skills over the last like 7 years from when I was 40 to now in just FPS reaction times. Like, I can watch Cray shoot things in games and he's in his mid 30s, and I'm like, God, he's so snappy on it, and I'm so lazy on it. And then so anyway, talking about levels of play, CD was like, where was I? And I was like, well, you were at least Dag level. And I think he had the same knack I did for research and commitment to trying and learning different stuff. I get distracted by the video. It's really fun. I saw the hook rat coming, and I was like, in real life. But I was like, yeah, you're right there. He was the kind, and he analyzed his own approach to video games, and it was more like his commitment stopped where he found something that worked, and he just sort of hammered on that one technique. He just like clung to it. He almost crutch on it in the end. And I think we all do that to some extent too. It's just whether, like, how naturally you perceive and react, and will like want to change and adapt a new technique into your play. Sometimes I force myself to do that now as I've gotten older. I'm like, why don't I try something different? So, like I started playing this game, and I think I was the elf girl, but I really liked the dwarf, and then I really didn't like the guy I'm actually playing in the video right now, the witch hunter. Instead, like, he was like, I was like, I don't know if I like that guy. But then when I tried each class, I learned a lot more about what the other class was bringing to the table, and how I could learn things I learned here could adapt, maybe not even to the gameplay, but like, if I could, I think Saltspierre, the witch hunter, had like a lot of techniques where he didn't really need to keep his health up, and it's like, oh, okay, so like this one character regenerates slowly, so as long as I'm only getting nickeled and dimed, I'm doing fine. And then that would be the elf girl, and then the dwarf could tank really hard, and just like, he could ignore big hits, and he could do all these tanky things and like taunt mobs in. And it's like, okay, so he rarely needs healing. In fact, he could just benefit from the girl's passive healing if she had it for the team. And Marcus felt more like he was gonna need heals from time to time. Like, uh, so all of these characters approach the resource of health in different ways that made it so. Elf Girl's like, I'm not really pressuring the team. I'm gonna live off my regeneration. And the dwarf's like, I'm so tough. I barely need healing. And Marcus is like, can I have the healing? And Saltpierre is like, I don't even really want to be healed. I'm being annoyed that I'm being healed by the Elf Girl. Like, so all the resources get funneled into like a much better way. Or to make it more relevant, I've been playing EDF, Earth Defense Force 4.1 lately, again with Andy, a game that's 4-player, has a lot of small analogs to the game you're watching here. And there are classes that they only bring like 2 things to the field, like 2 guns or whatever, but sometimes the gun is a gun that can heal. It's like their way of having like healing brought on the field. And there's another class that can bring like a canister they put down that heals people, and then but that's about it. And it turned out that Air Raider could also summon vehicles, and those functioned as like additional hit points above and beyond your character's hit points, the armor of the vehicle. And so that was a way of like, oh, okay, so if I'm on the Air Raider and I try to keep the discipline of like keeping myself in a vehicle, then I won't need as much healing, and then I can, whatever character Andy's on can maybe play a little more like forward and can like benefit from all the healing and stuff. So there's just ways to approach resources, like thinking about resources and experience. And playing the game in different ways gives you insight into manipulating the resource. Like, what's the resource in the game? Is it time? Is it hit points? Is it damage? Every game very, very different. But all right, let's call it here. That's about 20 minutes in. So hope that explains more what rule number 1 is about. Making a commitment to all facets of getting better, and realizing that just getting better isn't fun. It can be fun, but sometimes fun makes you get better. Like, they all kind of interact, and you gotta take your little slider and like set it where you want, and I suggest that getting better be somewhere around 50 and maybe not more than 70. And don't be too low, because for me personally, I hate like putting shit on everybody else of like, well, Griff's no good at this game, so we're gonna have to like hard carry him. It's like one of the things I hate hearing in games. And people love to try and give me hard carries in games because they're like, you always help us out so much. Then let's make it up for you. Get an alt in here and we'll level it up. And it's like, that's like one of the most frustrating times I can have in a game. It's pretty wild. That hits my personality so hard. But yeah, make a commitment, folks. All right.